Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. The SMG meta here in season 2 of Warzone honestly is very competitive. They've finally gone out and adjusted the Jackal a little bit. They've also adjusted other SMGs with various buffs. We have a new one in the mix, and so the actual SMG meta is looking a lot more healthy than it did in season 1. And today I wanted to break down the new top 5 best SMG loadouts here in Warzone. So I wanted to start first here on COD Community, take a look at their TTK graph and break down some of these top tier SMGs. So looking at our first 6 out of 8 here, we'll plug and play with some of the others, right? We got our very competitive list, quite frankly. Like, there's a lot of parity on this graph, which is objectively a good thing, but like the C9, our orange line here, just so insanely consistent, really good up close, and then in the mid-range it really starts to take over as one of those true best SMGs, all the way out to like a realistic range you'd want to be fighting, which is probably like 30 to 35 meters at max. You know, beyond that range, or even at that range, at that limit there, that's when the rifles, the LMGs start to take over a little bit more. But the C9 is just so reliable through and through. The KSV as well, one of my new personal favorites, kind of doing the same thing. It's just a little bit slower up close, but still very good, all things considered. And then in the mid range, it really again shines the most here. Fantastic sniper support choice, but you can even use this as just like a standard SMG and it's going to feel phenomenal. The PPSH, insane first damage range, although it does still feel a little bit awkward just because of how fast the fire rate is, but how slow either your ADS or your slide to fire or your sprint to fire in certain instances can be. So the movement's still a little bit clunky there, but if you have your sights up and you can hit shots, the thing's gonna absolutely melt through its first and second damage ranges, quite frankly. The PP919, it's a little bit worse in the mid-range, but it's still pretty consistent and easy to use. So while it does drop off a little bit more than some of these other options, I mean, the first damage range, which you can extend out a little bit further, is gonna be still fantastic there. And just because of its overall feel being so easy and so straightforward, even though it's a little bit slower than these other options, a lot of people will still flock to it ultimately. The Kompakt, also a crazy TTK option. The best TTK in the first damage range, drops off a little bit, but still very reliable in the second damage range as well. One that, again, much like the PPSH, values accuracy a ton just because of that fire rate, but still certainly a great choice. You do have something like the Jackal though, which I wanted to compare on this breakdown because obviously people will be asking about it. It's been the top SMG for the last 2 months basically. You can see pretty much everywhere. I mean, red line here, worst in the close range, worst in the mid range, worst in the second mid range. It's just really not all that great anymore. You could go through and even add in some of the other SMGs, like for instance the Tanto. If we were to go through here, let's strip it of the attachments just so it's a fair comparison. Kind of the same deal. Like, it's decent enough in its first damage range, but then drops off much more, and the accuracy value here, just because that slower fire rate, is obviously very important. So you miss shots, it gets even worse. Again, just not really a true competitor in that top 5 or close to that top 5 currently. And then you got the SOG, which is maybe a little bit closer than the Tanto or the Jackal as it stands. It's all right in its first damage range, drops off a little bit early in that second damage range, and it's okay through the mid range, but then really drops off beyond 17 meters really. So it also has a weird accuracy thing going on. It's just kind of an awkward SMG as well. So definitively, I think it's a pretty obvious top 5, but within this top 5, it's incredibly competitive with the C9, the KSV, the PPSH, the Bison, and the Kompakt. So that said, let's go ahead and break down the best setups for these best SMGs. So at number 5, I think the Bison is definitely the clear choice here, at least. While yes, that first damage range is so good and still super competitive, that second damage drop off is certainly noticeable compared to these other choices, but it's still insanely easy to use. And that's the real pro of this thing, is that really with any setup, or if it's even ground loot, you can pick it up and it's going to be so straightforward. Anyone of any skill level can probably find success with this thing. Great damage per mag because the default magazine is so large as well, which does also allow you to use other attachments elsewhere. So for instance here, basic suppressor will just keep me off the radar. Very straightforward with that, of course. Long barrel extends out that damage range to just over 17 meters, so that drop off is a little bit further out now. That's always nice if you can extend that first damage range. And with the 540 velocity, that's going to be fine for all the realistic fights you want to take with this thing. Don't need a magazine as mentioned, so instead we opt for the ergonomic rear grip. Fantastic for a faster slide to fire and a faster ADS speed, so it's going to be more aggressive outright. Balanced stock is also adding in some mobility with a better general movement speed, better strafe speed, so again just becomes a tad bit more aggressive. Then I personally really like the feel of recoil springs on this. Just makes the gun an absolute laser regardless of where you're fighting. It's free recoil basically. You don't really need extra velocity on an SMG like this. It's just not going to really do much for you in gunfights, and you don't really need a laser, you don't need a magazine, and I think the irons are incredibly clean, so why not get some free control, right? Now at number 4, I've got the Kompakt. This thing fries up close as we saw. The fire rate though means that even with the max extended mag, the DPM is still certainly a concern. You can burn through ammo here, which means you're gonna have to reload a lot, and if you miss shots while you're burning through that ammo, that's just not a good equation. But as long as you focus on accuracy, which this setup does a lot, and you can land shots consistently, this thing will be an absolute melt machine. It's definitely a lot of fun to run here in season 2. So because we are so focused on accuracy, I do go ahead and run the compensator first and foremost. Helps out with vertical control, just makes the gun a whole lot easier. Ranger foregrip helps out with horizontal control, makes the gun more predictable. It also gives you a bit of sprinting movement speed, so the weapon also gets a little bit more aggressive as well. That's a win-win. Extended 3 here, max option, 60 rounds. Even then, because you have a 1091 RPM, you rip through this ammo like crazy. So really, if this thing had like a 75 round drum, it'd be elite, but 60 will work. You're still gonna have to reload a lot regardless, just because of how fast this fire rate is. I like ergonomic rear grip here yet again, slide to fire benefits, ADS benefits. Then also, of course, definitely here recoil springs is very beneficial for that added free recoil control as well. So this will make the gun a lot easier to use. I think the irons are pretty clean to stay on target with, and if you can do so, I mean, very few guns stand a chance at outgunning this in the close range. And by the way, as we are going through all the weapons and setups here today, if you enjoy the video, if you find the information helpful, a like rating is always really appreciated, helps grow the channel and share the video around. And if you happen to be new to the channel, or maybe you have not subscribed yet, we should change that every single day. I got you covered with news, updates, patch notes, and meta breakdowns, so feel free to hit that subscribe button and help us get one step closer to reaching 1 million subscribers. Now at number 3, I've got the PPSH. This would be higher if it just didn't have that sort of weird feel to it, as mentioned. With the muzzle flash and the smoke, it can be kind of awkward at times, although it is toned down from where it launched in season 2. And then also just the general movement here, because of the attachments being different than other subs, you kind of have to weigh your pros. Do you really want a faster ADS, or do you really want a fast slide to fire, or do you really want a fast sprint to fire? You can't necessarily get all of those like you could on some other builds. However, as long as you got your sights up and you can start spraying and praying, this thing will tear through enemies, right? So here I do go for the suppressor again, just to keep me off the radar. I don't find the recoil to be too obnoxious, especially in the close range, but if you wanted better control, you could absolutely rock a compensator there instead. Long barrel gives us over a 20-meter effective damage range. Fantastic for an SMG, and a 530 velocity works fine for that. Ranger foregrip straight up for better horizontal control and sprinting movement speed, so more aggressive and easier to use. You'll love to see that. Extended 2 is only 55, so again, the DPM is not going to be great here, much like the Kompakt. 952 rate of fire, and then a 55 round mag means you are going to be reloading a lot, but you also are going to be putting a whole lot of bullets into enemies real quick, and they'll be getting knocked over real quick, right? And then lastly, for me, I value ADS a lot, so I go for the quick draw stock. That said, the combat stock is fantastic if you care about sprint to fire and your slide to fire there. Ergonomic stock is great if you care about strafe speed and a sprint to fire. Balance stock for just general movement is also a viable option too, so I'd recommend testing around, seeing which of these really feels the best for your style of play. If you do a lot of jump shotting, or a lot of sliding, or, you know, whatever the case is, a lot of pre-aiming, pick what works well for you. All of them are going to be good choices ultimately at the end of the day. And the PPSH, really fun SMG. Now at number 2, I've got the KSV. This thing has been so fun to use here in season 2 so far, whether you are rocking it as sniper support or just as a traditional secondary. It gets the job done. With 5 attachments, this thing is solid. If you wanted to upgrade to 8 with gunfighter, you could also do so there, and it'd be a fantastic option there too. So for me, I've sort of learned to live with the irons. They're not my favorite, but I can get by with using them in the close range. If you wanted to use gunfighter, you could absolutely rock like a Kepler microflex or something there, and that'd be pretty beneficial as well. But with 5 attachments, I think this is the most optimal setup. Suppressor to stay off the radar, of course. Long barrel gives us a 19.6 effective damage range, so that's fantastic. 570 velocity, 575 velocity actually. Again, gonna work just fine. Ranger foregrip, control and mobility. Extended 2 in this case is going to be a 50 round mag. That works fine for this rate of fire. You're not going to burn through ammo in like a concerning way by any means. Then I also like ergonomic rear grip on here. Slide to fire and ADS again, just making it a lot more aggressive. With gunfighter, throwing on an optic, throwing on, you know, a balanced stock here, then recoil springs if you wanted to. Gun could be even more advantageous if you're okay with not having that true secondary, whether it be a sniper, a rifle, whatever the case is. The KSV though, great choice as it stands. And then lastly here, the C9, the most well-rounded SMG in the game right now. And really what I love about the C9 is I don't think there's one definitive build that's just the best. There's a bunch of different ways you could really optimize this depending on your playstyle. First up, love the irons, don't need an optic. I like the compensator in this case just just because I'm getting max control out of this. I feel really, really confident, really pushing everything and even playing in the mid-range because this thing's going to be so easy to use. I actually don't use a barrel, but if you wanted to, you could swap out the rear grip or the stock for this instead, maybe extend out that damage range some. But honestly, as it stands now, even 13-meter effective damage range works well because the drop off is not super harsh. Ranger foregrip, control and mobility there. Extended to 50 rounder, it works in this case. 60 would be the most optimal, but you'll be just fine with 50 in all squad sizes. Ergonomic rear grip, slide to fire and ADS, and then also balanced stock for general movement there too. This is another gun that even with gunfighter, if you were just using like 7 of the 8 attachments with recoil springs and a barrel, still would be great. If you really wanted an optic, you could use one, or if you really cared about a laser, you could use one. But for me, I mean, even 5 attachments, this thing so consistent and so reliable, and definitely my favorite SMG as it stands, and I would say definitely the most competitive one as well. That is going to wrap things up for this video though. If you enjoyed it, you found it helpful, a like is seriously appreciated. And if you're new to the channel, you want to guarantee that every single day you're in the know for the latest news, updates, meta breakdowns, and patch notes, it's all right here. So feel free to hit that subscribe button on your way out. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you later. Peace out.